Okay, I think it's 4:05. We should start. So, guys, again, welcome. Good afternoon to the episode two of conducting this series under the aegis of Wealth Desk, the company I've recently joined, and pretty excited to bring you all the great, a new kind of stuff under this umbrella. Now, I'd spoken enough about what Wealth Desk does and all those things in the previous webinars. So let me focus on the topic at the hand today, which is your quant-based investing, momentum strategies, sector-based investing, and a lot of jargons which I used on LinkedIn to actually, entice you guys to attend this session today. How I look at quant-based investing and this kind of approach to equity investing is many of us who are joining this call, I am sure because I know most of you guys who follow me on LinkedIn and Telegram and all, are basically students of finance mostly. They are Most of you guys are either CFA level one candidates, two, three, or CFA charter holders, BCom graduates, or aspirants into the financial world. Right. That is why you're listening to all my bakwas as well in all these webinars. What I see is that theoretically, whatever we study in CFAs and the colleges, the BComs, MComs, MBAs, is mostly aligned to the fundamental analysis part of it. How to do accounting, how to interpret the balance sheets, profit and loss statements, the ratios. It all starts with that. It all ends with how to apply all these things when you are looking at a company in general, read the annual reports, and do a lot of these kind of exercises to finally come up with the DCF modeling, the intrinsic value calculations. And then finally, you said that I have done a fundamental analysis approach, and this is the value of the stock I have got, undervalued, overvalued, and blah, blah, blah. A lot of things are there. Many times we think that whatever we have done, whatever hard work we have put in our exercises, generally it tends to be not followed. The market doesn't follow that. Prime example, is ITC, right? So much of an analysis has been done on ITC stock that its value is cumulative value is so much, but it's still languishing at 200. And now the jokes and memes are being created on that. So how do you define this fundamental, whether they're following or not? Stocks like, I can name few stocks, but like Adani Group stocks. I mean, some people can say that, okay, these are not following the basic fundamental analysis kind of a calculation. I mean, some startups are getting the growth or the new tech firms are getting a P of 120, 130. They're getting listed at 100 P. So where is the fundamental approach to it? Then there is another study, parallel study, which is the technical analysis. The technical analysts, obviously, they say people generally, I've seen technicians and the fundamentalists keep fighting against each other that technical analysis is better or fundamental analysis is better. I take a middle path. I say select a stock based on the fundamentals because corporate governance is anyways much more important when you are selecting a stock. But using the technical tools which are available like MACD, RSI, moving averages and all, you can also time the market. You can time when to enter, when to exit. Most of the stocks are good. ITC is not a bad stock. ITC is a great stock, but maybe there is a time. There should be a trigger when you enter, when you want to enter that, right? There are few stocks which will always move in range. One example which is coming to my mind is Bharti Airtel. Bharti Airtel has been in range since, last 10 years, between 300 to I think 600, 650. It keeps on ranging. Bharti Airtel was accidentally my second stock I have ever purchased in my life, and that was at 353. The stock has never got split. The stock has never got bonus shares and all, and still today it's at 550, 520. These kind of stocks you get, it's not a kind of a stock you will want to keep it for a, let's say, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year horizon, but you enter, you exit. So these are some of the trading stocks which probably they're there, and when you want to time it, technical analysis comes to your help. Then there is a third piece of art of equity investing, which is prominent in the West, but it is coming up in much of speed in India, which is called quant-based investing. Now, what is actually, how I define quant-based investing? It's actually your data, picking up the past data, finding patterns, finding trends using various algorithms, which probably we are going to discuss today with Sujit, what it is all about. And finding patterns, then making some kind of regression, some kind of models, and a lot of mathematical tools go behind it. So that actually entails your mathematics, entails your data science and technology, because you need speed. If there is a huge chunk of data, in US we have data for 100 years. right? In India, we do not have that much of data, but whatever data we have, 20, 25, 30, 40 years, we use it. We use it to see what are the patterns emerging, and then we apply some kind of factors to it. I'll stop over here because I am not the expert into this field, although I am a student still, and I have been reading about this a lot, and I am a firm believer of quant-based models. Gradually, I have moved from fundamental to technical to quant, and I'm a proponent of all three actually. Learn as much as you can, right? As many techniques as you can. So let me introduce Sujit to you. Let me bring him up front. And Sujit, a little bit of intro I want to give to the audience about you, and then we'll begin our candid discussion about your journey and whatever you are doing at OpenQ, at Quantech Capital, and let's see how quickly these guys actually take in all the gyan you probably will give today. So guys, Sujit is actually the founder of a company which is called Quantech Capital, which is basically it creates solutions into investment and analytical kind of solution. Sujit is an alumni of St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. He's a CA and an MBA from ISB Hyderabad. Sujit, I think that was what, batch 2005 pass out, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So he comes over with like 15 years of experience in global equity markets with companies like Deutsche Bank. So he's my ex-colleague, although we have never actually, overlapped. But then he moved from Deutsche to MSCI and across various functions: research, systematic strategies, factor-based investing, risk model, analytical tools. What I know from him is that he was instrumental in creating many stuff at MSCI, which we'll discuss today. So Sujit, welcome to the episode 2. Excited to have you here today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Vaibhav. And before we start, I would just want to say that we are all students of the market. So
right.
I'm equally a student as much as everyone else on the call.
That is what I actually tell people, that even if I have, let's say, 10, 12 years of experience, this was the first time in 2020 March that I experienced that, I mean, see, I entered the market in 2010. That was after the global financial crisis. Apart from a 2012-13 taper tantrum years when the market was moving slow and somewhat, mid cap and small cap downfall when 2018 was, we saw after the budget, I actually did not see a bear cycle in 10 years.
Right. Okay.
Call it because of the liquidity infusion after the global financial crisis or whatever. So even after 10 years, I was like, oh, what has happened to my portfolio? 50% down, kind of downside I saw. And obviously you learn from practical experiences. So how much CFA, CMT, anything you do, ultimately you have to be a student of the market.
Yeah, actually, so I was at the forefront of 2008 financial crisis. I was based out of London, and I've seen how layers and layers of things got wiped out. So when we came out of 2008 crisis, I thought that, okay, I have seen the worst of it. But then 20 was out of the syllabus, right? Nobody was prepared.
No, even I read veterans of 40 years are saying, and this is in media. I mean, in March 2020, when we were locked down, and I was all the time listening to CNBC TV 18, people with 30, 35, 40 years of US experience are saying, I've never experienced anything like that. Correct. And people are comparing it not to 2008, but to some crisis in 1929.
1920s, correct.
Exactly. So and what has happened after that is like everybody to see. I could never predict that would happen. Honestly, I openly admit I had a target of 12,500 by Diwali, but that came somewhere around what, July, August only.
Yeah.
And then it's all history. So Sujit, again, let's start from the beginning and then we'll get onto the topic so that people get to know about you. How did you start? What did you do in Deutsche? What was your first job was about? And you said you were in US, right?
So London. So actually, Deutsche was not my first job. My first job was with Irevna, which was a boutique firm,
Crystal, right?
Out of Chennai. Correct. Now it's part of Crystal.
Okay.
So after CA, that was my first job, and over there, my role was mostly to do equity modeling, and when companies comes out with the numbers, maintain the Excel model and update it so that the senior portfolio managers can use those numbers and come up with his own strategies and so on and so forth. I stayed with them till 2004 when ISB, and then 2005 I graduated from ISB and joined Deutsche Bank as a fundamental analyst as part of their global research team. and did that for 2 years. I was allocated Japanese equities, so I used to cover most of the Japanese companies. Again, the standard work that all the sector analysts or company analysts do: track the company announcement, update the numbers, update the target price, and so on and so forth. 2 years I did, and then I said, "बहुत हो गया, मतलब DCF modeling कहाँ तक करूँगा?" So fortunately,
it becomes boring. I know. I mean, just punching down the numbers into something. I'm like, what, data entry, right? Yeah.
So fortunately there was a guy who was a quant who used to sit next to me, and he used to do some funky stuff in R at that time. And I used to get very fascinated and excited that how by a simple click of a button and few lines of code, he's coming out with some amazing conclusions and all. So he explained me broadly that what they are doing, what happens and all. And then I really liked it. So I told my manager, who was an MD at that time in Deutsche, that, I would want to do a career shift.
Right.
So he said that, well, you don't know anything about quant, about coding and anything, and none of the MDs is gonna sit and train you on the quant stuff. First of all, whether we can consider your request or not, it's a question in itself. But let's say even if we agree to it, you will not find an MD whom you can report into. Now, in investment banking, if you are reporting to an MD and you start reporting to a VP tomorrow, that's considered as a demotion, right? You're not a successful person in your professional life, so as to say. But I said, I don't have any issues with that. If I get to learn some new stuff, I'm okay with it. So then as destiny would have it, there was a role within the team for the quant. And then they asked me, but you have to report into VP. I said, okay, fine, I don't have an issue. And that was it. There were two people. One was University of Cambridge graduate and another was University of Warwick. And they both just took me under their wings. When I started off, the only skill set I had was I was reasonably comfortable with Excel worksheet function, a little bit of advanced worksheet function. That's it. I knew that Alt F11 opens a macro window, but I didn't know what to do with that. Right. So that was my starting point, getting into the quant space. And from there, I was excited that, okay, day one, I'm going to learn coding and all. And my mentor says that, no, forget coding. That's, first, I'm going to give you some quant problems. You have to solve that problem using only Excel worksheet function without VB and anything. I said, but I saw the guy using R and he's doing everything in the click of a button. That will come much later. First, I need to see whether you can logically think through the steps, because code is an implementation of the logic. So, and that is what I tell to the new guys who approach me for they want to make a career in quant. I say that if you don't know coding, don't worry. That is how I started. But make sure that you know the logic flow correct. If you are able to find the logic correct, then implementation is balanced 20%.
True.
So once that happened, once he was okay, I remember the last bit, he said that you need to develop a Monte Carlo simulation in Excel. I said, okay, fine. So using some random numbers from here and there, and then he said, fine, now you can move on to the VBA front. So VBA ho gaya, and then spent a good amount learning it. He suggested, he also did some handholding. Once the VBA was done, I thought, okay, ab to main quant ban gaya. I know strategy, I know Excel, I know coding. I'm a quant. So he said, oh, no, you are just getting warmed up. Because if you want to get accepted in the quant world, you need to know some serious programming language. So I said, okay, fine. So what to do? So at that time, R and MATLAB was, and this is like 2007, 2008. I said,
okay, Python wasn't introduced into the scene back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think Python 3, which most of us use now, it got introduced only around September 2008-9. So majority of the professionals were still on MATLAB at that time.
Right.
So I said, okay, fine. So they got me the license. It took me good 2, 3, 4 years to get comfortable with MATLAB. And also now from there, I reached a stage where I could build the entire system, doing web scraping, getting data from MATLAB on the fly, doing the analysis, everything. So that comfort was there.
So Sujit, I'll keep on disturbing you in between. So
Sure.
You learned MATLAB on the job, right? Not like
Correct.
you did. Okay, great.
Right. So once MATLAB was there, I comfortable. I thought now up to my quant ban gaya. Then I realized कि MATLAB तो हो गया, अभी तो Python आ गया. So now you have to learn Python. So by the time Python अभी ठीक से सीखा भी नहीं कि पता चला कि there's cloud computing and everything has come in. So the thing about quant is, it reminds me of that advertisement कि पापा पेट्रोल तो खत्म ही नहीं होता, चल देगा. So that is what the quant stuff is. So that was my journey into quant. How I started and I've been told many times that I am one of the few chartered accountants who have made transition.
Right, of course.
Because majority of the quant guys I see are mostly engineers or
I mean, you are my first prime example. A lot of people ask, I am not from a engineering background. In fact, I am from an engineering background. I have done BTech in computer science, and I quit after like my BTech. So I moved completely into finance. I know I can pick up coding if I want to, but never want to. But you are one of the rare people I have seen with a complete background into the commerce side that has transitioned actually into the coding side. So hats off.
So last seminar, I was watching you asking Ujjwal that you are the engineer and you became successful, and a lot of engineers want to move on to the business.
You saw the recording?
Okay. I am the business guy who's moving on to the coding and want
the other way around. True. So you know, during the student days, and this is what is important for the guys who are at a early career stage on the call, is that guys, you can't predict. When I joined BTech in 2005, I joined because my friends were joining. Honestly, I come from Lucknow, tier 2 city. Family is not that academically, kind of who could tell me what to do. Though they said, it's your choice, whatever you want to do. 90% of my friends were doing engineering because everybody wanted to do IIT. Now, couldn't land into IIT, landed into a private college. But then after second year, I realized what's computer science? No, I joined something wrong. I am only interested into finance, numbers and all. Today, where I am doing sales into a startup after like Edelweiss, private wealth, after investment banking, and before my MBA, Sujit, actually I was a data analyst. So I myself, have worked on SPSS and MATLAB a little bit in a company where I was doing all the statistical modeling and all. So from there, transition to IB, transition to wealth management, HNI, and now whatever we are doing at Wealth, you know that. Same for you. I mean, when you were doing your CA, never you would have thought that you would become a quant-based.
No ways.
So keep your options open, guys. I mean, and keep, as I say, always think futuristic. You know how things are changing so fast. Everything is moving to technology. Sometimes you do not have an option but to learn technology. I mean, kya kar sakte? I mean, you have to move into that direction. You can't be like CA kiya hai, so I can't learn. Sujit is a prime example. Sujit, sorry. Now, what happened after that? So Deutsche.
So I stayed with them for 10 years. I joined them in 05. Till I stayed with them till 2015. In my last role, I was part of a proper quant strategy team. I think 5 or 6 of us who were running almost $10 billion of fund. I was not the fund manager. I was part of the team, and the team together used to run the fund across different geographies. That includes most of the developed markets like Japan, Europe, US, and I think a little bit of emerging market funds we had. So after 2015, I transitioned to MSCI. MSCI, I think majority of us would know, they are the global leaders in factor-based investment and analytical solutions. So my association with MSCI as an employee started from 2015, but my association with them as a client was pretty long, because in Deutsche, I used to use their product called Bara Portfolio Manager, where we used to evaluate the sources of risk and return for all the portfolios that we used to run in Deutsche. And when I joined MSCI, they were actually at that time working on GEM4 model is what they used to call it internally. Now I think it's called total market model. So the way Bara suite of analytics work is, once you subscribe to their product, you have to subscribe to their particular risk model. So they have a risk model for US, for Europe, for global, for a specific country, and so on. And they keep evaluating what changes we need to make to the model to make it more attuned and relevant to the market at that point in time. So there were a few factors that we were working on. I specifically worked on analyst sentiment factor. Then there were, I think, new sentiment factor and all, which became part of new sentiment. I'm not sure, but analyst sentiment factor became part of their trading model. So GEM4 had three different versions. One was fast moving, medium moving, and slow moving. So the way you evaluate factors which should be included in which version is that you look at the autocorrelation. And if the autocorrelation is pretty stable, that is, the signal is not moving much, then you can consider it for the slow moving stable model. And the signal is moving very fast. That basically means you need to update the model more faster to make it to keep it relevant for the market and so on.
So can I take the liberty of dissecting some of the words which obviously I do understand, but just for the sake of the participants. So when you say the factors, So right, obviously there are factors like sentiment analysis is one of the factors you would say that goes into the model, which fundamentals and fundamental analysis never covers, right? Technical might cover, but then quant obviously you have to, there are so many things which US does. But is there any equivalent sentiment index or sentiment kind of indices which are followed in India? Some agency follows what retail investors, institutional investors are basically thinking about the market.
Right. So we are actually having a plan to launch a sentiment index for Indian clients, but they are on the trading side, there are a lot of signals that traders use, particularly to gauge the sentiment on a 1 minute, 5 minute, 1 hour time frame.
Right.
From an investment perspective, there are vendors that provide you sentiment data, but that data has not been marshaled and converted into an investable index. At least I have not seen so far being offered by any of them.
All right.
But
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But somebody mentioned about VIX as a sentiment.
Exactly.
Yeah. But when I was talking about sentiment, I was talking more from investment point of view. VIX is more like a measure of fear or risk that you use for options trading. And sorry.
So again, so coming back to things, so we were discussing. So you want to share some slides, or we are good to have this candidate?
Yeah, I can. Actually, it says host as disabled, so if you can just.
Oh, is it okay? I'm so sorry. I'm just okay. Now I have it. Can you?
Yeah.
So I think obviously quickly just taking to the relevant slide. So my next question was obviously when we have covered a little bit of quant, I think you have a slide which explains a little bit of what quant based investing is, right? I think the second.
Right. So yeah. So I think at the start of the conversation, you gave a brief about quant already. So and which was like pretty much what I have also listed down here. So first is for anything to lend itself for a quant evaluation, the first thing is the data should be there. The data should be observable and measurable. Second important thing is that you should be able to identify patterns in that data that has a mathematical intuition. Now, intuition is a very important word over here. I've not used the word mathematical equation, because normally what happens is when you talk of equation, we are essentially talking of a closed system that it will have one defined input, one defined output, and this is how the relationship works.
Right.
Stock market is not a closed system, and we are talking about it from the stock market perspective. I remember one of my professors in the class mentioned that if you want to identify a correlation between amount of hair you have on your head and number of stars in the sky, put some number in Excel and it will give you some correlation number. And then you can start laughing, oh, okay, I control the stars of the sky. So, that's the beauty about mathematics. Third is the pattern should be recurring over a long period of time for it to lend it. So, basic rule of statistics is that you should have enough data in order to not have a biased view. And last, you should be able to test it for its statistical significance. Once these 4 things are there, you can build a quant process around that variable. Second thing I want to briefly touch about the difference between quant and technology. And that's what I mentioned when I said that, if you don't know programming, if you don't know technology, but if you have a proper logical thought process, you can become a quant. That's not a problem, because you see, these days we are talking of technology probably for last 10, 12, 15 years. But the concepts that we are using, Fama-French factor model came out in 1990s, right? Robert Hogan came out with low volatility in 60s and 70s. Mean variance optimization was identified back in 60s and 70s. So these guys did not have the power of Python and cloud computing and MATLAB at that time, but still they came out with theories which is all-time classic and still holds today true. However, in today's world where speed is of essence, if you embrace technology, that will take your quant-based application or process completely to the next level. But the point is, it's not a showstopper for you to start, even if you're not from an engineering background. So, and I would just finish this slide with a little bit of a trivia. So these days, you mentioned about fundamental, technical, quant, and all, right? So I'll just leave this audience with this trivia, and probably we can circle back to this question after the end of the this webinar. We all have heard about ratio, right? So would you call P ratio a quant metric or a fundamental metric?
Wait, I'll put this on a poll. So people
Right.
can just answer this. Meanwhile, if you can just quickly move ahead, the poll will be visible in 2 minutes.
Right. And whether you take P ratio of 15 and cost of capital of 6.7% are the same or they are different. So
Right.
one case I'm talking of language of a fundamental guy, and second I'm talking the language of a quant person. Right. All right. Now, there are different flavors of quant investing. Factor-based investing is definitely there. We will take a little bit of a deep down in subsequent slide. The second is risk parity. And a lot of time we do risk parity overlay on factor investing just to control for better alpha or a better risk return profile. Risk parity can be of multiple types. I have listed down 3 over here. One is a simple low volatility. So before I get into this, let me just briefly talk about how the volatility of the portfolio is calculated. I'm sure a lot of you guys will know, but I'll just try to briefly touch in terms of mathematical point of view. So for an individual stock, the volatility is nothing but the standard deviation of daily price return, right? Which is essentially measuring the dispersion, the measure of dispersion of a stock relative to its mean. But if you look at it from a portfolio point of view, we all know that A plus B whole square is A square plus B square plus 2AB. Similarly, from a variance of a portfolio point of view, we have if we look at variance of AX plus BY, it is X, where X and Y are the weights of stock. Then the variance of AX plus BY becomes X square variance of A plus Y square variance of B plus 2AB XY. Correlation of between A and B, and then multiplied by standard deviation of A and B. So if you look at this formula, there's a correlation term in the entire equation. And we all know that correlation can move from -1 to +1. So if you have 2 stocks in a portfolio where correlation is negative, the whole variance of the portfolio comes down. And that's the fundamental to the concept of diversification, right? Now, if you are trying to minimize the portfolio variance, and you only look at the individual stock variance and ignore the correlation bit of it, then you are not minimizing the portfolio variance. Then you are missing out on a significant part of it. So minimum variance people use to from a risk parity point of view, but the only problem is it might end up giving you a lot of concentrated portfolio. So to control for that, there is third method of equal risk contribution, where there is a little bit of a trade-off between variance and correlation, and that serves the purpose of reducing the overall portfolio risk, and at the same time set it up as a cron job and just sit tight aram says morning 9 o'clock. And you can actually set up an alert on your Telegram using a chatbot. So, and everything is automated. You don't have to do 9 o'clock. AWS will fire the order. You will receive a notification in AWS. Trades are happening, and at the end of that, the P&L will be calculated automatically. And you can carry on with your normal day job. So that's the power of quant and technology when mixed together.
Great. So let me just launch the poll. I have just typed on the question and give guys 30 seconds. I don't know how much time I actually. So I'll give 30 seconds to you guys. Just answer this. It's anonymous. Ten more seconds to go. Sujit, I hope you can see the responses, right, as a panelist? Okay,
no, I mean,
okay, I'll tell you the answers. In fact, I'll give another 15 seconds because almost 75% people have voted. Let me reach at least a 80% mark. Guys, quickly, 10 more seconds. Okay, fine. I think I'll stop it now. So Sujit, the responses are actually 77% people say P ratio is a fundamental metric. 23% say quant metric. I did not give an option that it's both. So if the answer is both, so it's my bad.
Actually, the answer is both.
So all 100% people are correct actually. Right. But in the second question, I gave this option of saying no clue. So RP ratio 15 and cost of capital 6.67%, one and the same. 22% people say yes. 47% people say no. 31 people say no clue. So
right.
because it's no clue, that is why we need an answer from you. You want to give now or later on?
Yeah, we can address it now that the poll is over. So, okay, so I'll go a little bit into mathematics on this. So what is PE ratio? Which is a ratio of two numbers, right? Inverse it. Instead of taking PE ratio, I'll take E by P. E by P is nothing but earnings yield.
Earnings yield, yeah.
Earnings yield is, or any other form of yield, is considered as one of the input in the cost of capital when you are calculating a discounted cash flow. Now, just compare this earnings to yield with the solution of an infinite GP series. Let's say if you have an infinite GP series with a starting term A and a common ratio R, that infinite GP series will converge into a solution which is A by R. Again, ratio of two numbers, right? So E by P and A by R. Now, if I look at E by P as an infinite GP series where your first term is earnings and your output is P, cost of capital becomes a balancing term, right? And that balancing term, when you solve for it, will converge into PE ratio. So when a fundamental analyst is saying that, PE ratio is 15 or the cost of capital is 6.7%, it basically means that market is discounting its earnings at 6.7%. Now, if the PE ratio becomes, let's say, 100,
let's say 100 and 1% becomes your
1%, right? So then the cost of capital becomes 1%. Now, one market is discounting the earnings of the company at 1%, whereas your savings bank rate is 4% today.
Right.
Market is discounting it at a cost lower than the savings rate or a risk-free rate in the market. That is one of the reasons why people say that PE बहुत high or बहुत overvalued है. Another way of looking at it is the market is discounting at a very lower cost of capital, which effectively is saying that market will be able to the company will be able to fund its earning by borrowing money.
Just 1%. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, brilliant way to look at it. Yeah.
So essentially, whether it's a fundamental, whether it's a quant, it's one and the same thing. It's a quantamental, right? This is the term these days we hear in media. So essentially, it's just a flip of one number.
But what's your take on, Sujit? Let's say that we have seen some very highly respected companies trading at even 100, right? Walmart being a prime example, in everybody's mind it is. And then people actually, when they cannot say that, okay, I mean, ideally someone says that it has to come down, but it has never come down in the last 3 years. Now people are trying to figure out reasons to say that, no, because the company is doing such a great business, all the properties are their own, and that is why it deserves a little higher P. But if you look at this way in which what you are saying, their cost of capital is not even 1%. I mean, they are just, kind of discounting it at almost zero. So it's a free capital for them.
So basically, it means that the PE ratio as a metric doesn't work.
Exactly.
That is why we don't use PE ratio as a measure of valuation in OpenQ. We ran multiple metric of valuation, P, price to book, EV by EBITDA, and blah blah blah, all kind of metric ratios. But what we realized is that after, I think, post 2008, 2010, all these traditional metrics have stopped working. And the way we evaluate is we create a long short portfolio in a beta neutral manner. And then we see that if we remove the market impact, will this particular variable itself will make alpha for us or not? And what we realized is that majority of them don't.
Okay.
And if you actually look at it from theory point of view, price to book as a metric was designed when companies had a lot of tangible assets on their balance sheet, and you could actually measure them. Right. These days, a lot of companies are driven by the intangibles, right? So there's a brand building. So I was reading a report like Coke has a brand which runs into hundreds of crores, which is not there on the balance sheet by the traditional accounting norm. So of course, the P ratio in these cases will be very high, and you'll not be able to capture them.
True.
So knowing something about a metric that we have learned in classroom and trying to make money based on that metric are two very different things. So, and that is what you very rightly pointed at the start of the start of this session, that we have all learned about fundamentals in our classrooms, and that also flows over into the practical life. But building a portfolio just around these fundamental understanding and making money is very difficult.
Great, cool. I think we should now enter the crux of the thing. What is factor-based investing? What is factor investing basically?
Right. So I'll actually just give a brief technical view on that, and then I'll try to connect it with the user journey in a very simple manner. So back in 60s and 70s, there was only one model, CAPM model, that was a single factor model driven by beta. That is, अगर ज़्यादा पैसा बनाना है तो ज़्यादा beta exposure लो, higher the risk, higher the return. That is where the whole thing came from.
Yes.
Then the whole research thing happened, and then it was found out that no, actually the low volatility companies make more return in the long run. So then the Pharma French model came, which says that no, apart from the market,
the three-factor theory, right?
Three-factor theory. Yeah. Then there was a Carhart four-factor theory and whatnot. So the moot point is that at a very broad level, there's a market level risk which is captured by beta. There's no two ways about it. But within the beta, there are still pockets of smaller risk, where if you can design an algo or a process that identifies those small pocket of risk and captures them and builds a portfolio around it, you can actually have above market beating returns on your portfolio. So these smaller pocket of risk started to be termed as factors, and the returns that started getting generated by harnessing those smaller pockets came to be known as factor premiums. So that's the technical bit of it, but let's connect it with our day-to-day investment journey. When we want to invest in a stock or a portfolio, it is essentially I'm trying to answer three questions, right? Whether stock is a good stock or a quality stock, which we try to identify during fundamental analysis. Second is whether a good stock is available to you at a good price or not, is when we connect the fundamentals with the price of the stock. And third is whether the stock market is willing to take it from its good price to its right price. What is a right price? Nobody knows. But there is a right price is different from good price. That much is clear, because that is what the market is giving you signals. Now, you very aptly pointed out the example of ITC, right? ITC is a quality stock. It's a value stock, has a lot of cash flow, no risk, but stock is not moving from the price growth point of view. So would I invest in it? Answer is both yes or no, because if I am a senior citizen looking for a decent dividend yield income for my purpose, and where ITC has a history of giving good dividends as well as good bonuses, I might as well stay with it. I would not sell it. But if I am a young guy who's looking for some quick price-based returns, then of course ITC will not find part of my portfolio. So depending upon one's use case, one can build the portfolio accordingly. So once you have mixed and matched these three factors, it gives you the set of stocks that you can consider for investment. But that does not make your portfolio investment ready yet, because you have not considered the volatility part of it. So it might happen that, like, let's say if we are coming out from March 2020 kind of a situation, right? And at that time when the market is moving up, a lot of operator-driven stocks, or the stocks that you would not want to touch in the regular scheme of things, like Ruchi Soya, Alok Industries, or Suzlon Energy, they all start coming into your portfolio because the momentum is so strong. Right. So before investing it, you have to make your portfolio investment ready by putting in some more filters, which are more like sanity check on the portfolio. And that is where the size and the volatility bit comes in. And we will talk a bit more when we talk of specific strategy as we move forward.
Sure.
So this is essentially what I mentioned earlier, that factors are not something new. It's been there in the academic world since 60s, 70s and all. It's just that it became part of the mainstream investment world only in US after 2008 crisis. And now that thing is gradually coming to India as well. And we are one of the players who's bringing the best manufacturing practices in factor world. And of course, factor investing. So a lot of time people say factor is a passive process. Factor is a passive process, but the portfolio is an active portfolio. So what you are doing in factor is essentially what an active fund manager would pick and choose a stock with his own experience and understanding. We are doing the stock picking through the help of a computer, and it's all algo driven. So the process is passive, but the portfolio is pretty much active.
So your work is much lesser than a pure play active investor, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Someone who is like reading tons of annual reports and making all those models, punching in numbers. You just create a very, very robust algo, and then you sit down and just keep your portfolio, just track your portfolio, right? Is it?
It's as simple as that. As I said, you just need to focus on three things: quality, value, momentum. You are sorted.
Awesome.
That's
awesome. Less work, more returns.
Right. That's how it should be, right? Because
that's how it should be. Yeah.
Wealth creation should be very easy process. It's just that it's been made so complicated.
I agree.
So let's talk about momentum. So this is one of the factors, and there are multiple factors that you can build a portfolio around it that can give you a higher alpha. Now, momentum can be either in the price or it can be in the fundamental variables. So in this case, we have taken earnings momentum as a factor. So when we wanted to test whether momentum exists in Indian market or not, we started with this problem statement that, well, okay, momentum is widely discussed in academic literature as a important source of systematic alpha, but does that exist in India? And if yes, is it that can we take what has been defined in US as it is in India, or it needs a little bit of customization? With that, we started our research process. So first we dealt with price momentum. We ran with multiple simulations. I'm just
so for a layman, Sujit, can you just like for a layman, can you explain what a momentum is actually?
So I'll take the analogy from physics, let's say, even though I'm a physics guy, but you know, when you are driving a car,
right,
like there's a car, when car comes into motion, there is speed, then there's velocity, then there's acceleration, right? So unless you put a brake on the car will keep on moving on and on and on. Why? Because the momentum has come in and the momentum is pushing the car. To stop it, you need some friction.
Correct.
And the brake is that kind of friction. So that is what the momentum is also in stock market. A stock going up will continue to go up unless there is some break or some friction that comes out either in the form of bad earnings number, or there's some profit booking, or there's a bad governance, or there's a management change, or there's a qualified audit report, or whatever. Okay. So other things remaining constant, the stock that is going up should continue to go up. Right? So now that is what we wanted to test, that does momentum exist in India? And if yes, does it make money on a consistent basis? Before I proceed, I just want to put in a disclaimer that the momentum that we are discussing over here is different from the momentum that probably an intraday trader or a swing trader would be looking at.
All right.
You know, they would be looking at momentum indicators like MACD, RSI, MFI, and others. We are looking at it more from an investment point of view. That instead of investing in standard value strategies or a mutual fund or a PMS, can you build an investment strategy around momentum and still have a better return? So
this is quite different from the oscillators and momentum strategies we discuss in technical analysis, right?
Correct. So now we ran multiple simulations. So you can see that one raw momentum is what a pure, the way we have defined it is the percentage change, point to point percentage change from, let's say, 6 month or a 12-month earlier price compared to what it is today. Defensive momentum is a raw momentum overlaid with risk parity, is what we discussed while talking about flavors of quant. That and we looked at both the definitions, and we looked at multiple different look back window, that is the duration. So our acceptance or rejection criteria was that if you are looking at a quartile analysis, and quartile is basically, I'll explain that you take the entire universe. This has been done on top 200 as a universe. What top 200 universe means is I'm selecting 200 stocks by market cap, total market cap. And I'm dividing it into 4 quartiles, that is 25% each.
Yeah, 50
each.
Yeah.
So top quartile will have those 50 stocks that have a very high momentum score, or score in the sense that has shown a very high momentum over last 6 months or 12 months.
All right. So that's Q4 or Q1?
Q1.
Q1, okay.
Right. And similarly Q2, Q3, Q4.
Yeah.
So my decision criteria was that if momentum genuinely has an information content, then I should find an almost 45-degree trend line from the edges of Q1 to Q4. That is, Q2 return should be lower than Q1, Q3 should be lower than Q2, and Q4 should be lower than Q3.
Interesting.
Right. If that is there, then it's the first checkbox that, okay, momentum has some information content in the Indian market in top 200 universe. So you will
nice. Yeah.
You will see that we started with raw momentum, and the quartile profile is all over the place. Q2 is better than Q1 and Q3 and so on.
Correct.
As we built in risk parity on top of raw momentum in 12-month duration, patterns started emerging, but it still was not very clear. right? And then we reduced the duration from 12 months to 6 months, and then the pattern started becoming very clear. And then the defensive momentum 6 months is when the pattern is absolutely clear. It was like a thumping yes, right?
Yeah, wow, that's nice. I mean, it's almost a 45-degree kind of a slope.
Right. So, and in this, we ran different weighing factors. We ran on equally weighted, risk weighted, market cap weighted, diversity weighted. There are hundreds of ways you can weigh them, of which market cap weighted did not work. So we concluded that if you want to build a momentum-based strategy, you should not weigh your stocks by market cap. And if you think about it logically also, that when you are doing a market cap weighting, you are essentially giving double weightage to the momentum, because if the momentum is going up, the stock is moving up, the market cap is moving up. So which basically means that higher the market cap, higher the momentum, higher the weight allocation. And when the market moves, the whole market cap thing and the momentum thing wipes out the entire return. So it's like dealing with double whammy.
True.
Right? So data is basically telling you the story, which kind of makes complete logical sense.
I think, okay, so this slide is a little bit technical. So what I'll do is I'll ask someone if you can raise hand if you have a valid question. If you have a question, then I can allow one or two of you to speak. So Arpan, you are allowed to speak. So let me know if there's a question which is related to this slide. Arpan, you need to unmute yourself. I have given you the access. I think that Sharath, you can go next if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, this is Sharath. Man, first of all, it's excellent presentation. Excellent. Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Excellent presentation. Excellent information. I mean, too much information, to be honest. But see, when you started off this momentum, you were taking this like as a downward trend in terms of like your pyramid, your bars. Basically, one quarter over the next quarter, you're kind of going through that decreasing acceleration. Now, why can't I reverse this?
Okay, sorry, Sharath. I think probably I did not explain it properly. Q1 is not quarter. Q1 is quartile. So,
oh, I see. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I think I get it. Okay, fine. Go ahead, please. Yes.
Thank
you. Nivesh, your question, please.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, I have actually worked on a similar strategy. So I wanted to understand, like, so like you mentioned, equally weighted, right? So the first quartile will contain the top 25 stocks. I mean, the top 50 stocks, I mean, by market cap and by momentum, like the ones which have given the most returns in the last 6 to 12 months, like depending on the duration that you've chosen, correct?
Right. Not by market cap. Not by market cap. We have done the top 200 universe selection. That is where the role of the market cap is over. So after that, we are only going by momentum and the weighing scheme.
Okay, correct. So to get the 200 stocks, we are using market cap as a filter, and after that, segregating them into quartiles, we are using momentum, like the 6 months return or 12-month return. Correct. Yeah. So this basically, like the graph clearly tells us, like for the short duration period, that stocks which are showing good momentum in the past 6 months have given good returns, like the Q1 quartile, basically.
Right.
Correct. And the ones which are not, I mean, which are in the Q4 basically, and which have not shown good momentum, they have given the worst returns, basically poor returns, I would say.
Correct. Yeah.
So in risk weighted, how do you do that? I mean,
so individual stocks, standard deviation over last 12 months, we inverse it and we weigh them. So like higher the volatility, lower the weighting. And this is point of disparity. So,
okay. So sorry to interrupt. So this is, like you said, like initially it used to be like, if you want to make money, jitne zyada volatile hai, put money there. But here you are inversing that, like you said. It used to work initially, but not now.
No, so what I'm saying is that momentum and risk parity are two negatively correlated concepts. Momentum is basically when the price is going up, you allocate more. and risk parity is saying that if the volatility is more, you allocate less. So what we are doing is we are combining high momentum with a low volatility. That a stock which is giving a higher momentum with a lower volatility is the one where you should allocate your money.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, that explains.
Right.
Thank
Thanks, Sujit. Rahul, you can go next, and I think that's the last question we can take.
Hi, thank you, Sujit and Vaibhav. This has been really informative. So my question is, what all filters or checks you had to introduce to get a defensive momentum portfolio from a raw momentum portfolio?
We will discuss that. So right now I'm just talking about how we went about defining momentum as a factor, how we use this factor to actually build an alpha generating portfolio. That is there in the subsequent slide. We'll talk about.
I think that's great. I mean, I just interrupted because this slide might have looked, I thought it might have looked confusing to a few people. So I just thought, let me take a few questions. So Sujit, please continue.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing I forgot to mention is that the returns that you are seeing for quartile 1, these have been backtested over 20 years. So what we have done is and these are monthly rebalancing. So what we were doing is every month we used to create 50 stock portfolio depending upon the momentum score on that day. And we used to collect the returns over next 1 month. Again, next month we used to create the portfolio of top quartile, collect returns and so on. And we have done that over 20 years. So it gives you a return vector, running levels. And using those levels, you can calculate your risk adjusted returns. So the returns that you are seeing, even though the definition is 6 months, these are the returns over the last 20 years. So the stability of the signal is pretty much there because it's not like 6 months or a 12-month research that we are talking about.
Sujit, just help me with one very layman type of question which I have. So when you say 20 years, I mean, what about the companies which are so how much company should be in existence? I mean, the IPOs and all, the recently listed companies which all,
Yeah, so all the survivorship bias thing has been taken care of. So back in 2003, 2004, when Satyam was one of the marquee companies that has been considered till the time it was alive, Bank was part of the portfolio till the time its share price was 400 plus or so. DHFL was very much part of the universe and so on. So in terms of data, we source our data from Refinitiv, which is erstwhile Thomson Reuters. So it's good that you brought that point. So for building any kind of quant business or a quant portfolio, data is the bread and butter. And we have spent almost 1.5 to 2 years to build our data and database before we came out with any kind of research or portfolio.
There was a question related to someone asked that how do you source the data? So I think data is not freely available, right?
No, it's very expensive.
Lot for
so so you pay a bomb and then you spend 2 years cleaning the data and make it in consumable manner where you can come out with the proper research.
Right. Okay, we can move ahead, I think.
Then, okay, so this one is based on top 500 universe. And the reason I put this slide is just to tell you the importance of weighing factor with the alpha factor. So in the previous slide, we saw that on top 200 universe, defensive momentum works very well. In this top 500 also, you will see that raw momentum, while the quartiles do have downward sloping pattern, but you see in the interquartile spread, it goes from 1 to 14. But in a risk-weighted defensive momentum, it goes from 1 to almost 50. Right? So we are talking of almost 5 to 6x return in a long short manner. So this is like from completely beta neutral. Market beta has no role to play over here. When I look at individual quartile performance on this, and these are quartile performance, so this interquartile spread, even though it's an upward moving curve, which tells you can make 50x over 20-year period, this is not really a tradable curve because you cannot short the, except you cannot short the stocks in the cash market in India.
Yes.
This is a study just to identify the strength of the signal.
Right.
And when I look at individual curves of top quartile and bottom quartile, the risk-weighted defensive momentum goes from 100 rupees to almost 30,000 over 20-year period, whereas market cap raw-weighted moves from 100 to only 6,000, right? And look at the T-stat of this. T-stat is 2.94, which by traditional bookish definition is still statistically significant, which is greater than 2. But look at the T-stat of the lower row. It is almost 9x. So this tells you the strength of the signal. And as I mentioned, it is tested over 20-year period. Look at the curve of interquartile range of this curve versus this curve. This is far more volatile than this, right? Now, ये तो हो गया research की बात. Now let's talk of something very interesting. कि 2020 में the whole market fell. What was momentum doing at that time, right? So look at this curve. In 2020, this curve moved up, right? You see a sharp spike.
Correct.
Look at this curve over here. In 2020, it has started coming down.
Yep.
Peak, right? So now you can ask that in March 2020, when the whole market has gone down, how can momentum be up, right? So that is where you have to differentiate between what is beta and what is momentum. When the whole market is going up, beta as a factor is something that you need to look at. That if you are overexposed on a high beta stock, that means you are going down. But in a long shot, if your momentum is still going up, which basically means that the higher momentum stocks are falling less than the low momentum stock. Now, one of the rule of thumb is, in a crash, the stocks that fall less, that recovers faster and starts giving you positive return faster. The same holds with momentum also. If you have a momentum stock that has fallen less compared to the other stocks, and if you're riding on it, the momentum will reverse and it will give you much faster return. And we all saw that happen in post
May, June, yeah.
Right. So when we saw this curve, we were clear that we should not shut down our momentum strategy, because the momentum is still working in the market. Even though it was giving negative return, the signal was saying that in a long shot it's still positive.
I'm interested to know the returns of your strategy in that case. Do you have those slides?
Yeah. So
we'll come to that later then.
Yeah. And this is about earnings momentum. So in earnings momentum, I've put in a different slide just to show how to evaluate, because it's a fundamental based metric. And one of the major issue in using fundamental data is the data cleaning itself. So we all know that listed companies comes out with their quarterly numbers every 3 months or 6 months, not 6 months, sorry, every 3 months, right? So which basically means that analyst expectations as well as the consensus numbers keeps getting updated every 3 months. So the way we defined earnings momentum, we ran multiple simulations that one should be the percentage change in EPS, second was percentage change in earnings yield, third was percentage change in operating profit, and so on and so forth. Of what we realized is that percentage change in EPS works very well over a 3 month, 6 month duration. If you will see that after 6 months, the return in the forward 12-month EPS starts falling, but the trailing EPS is pretty much within the line. There's a slight blip and then it recovers back to its original form. Now, why do we have to do this analysis? Because majority of the models that are there in the market, they all use trailing 12-month numbers. Now, the thing about trailing 12-month is that it has a benefit of fixed anchor. Now, what trailing means is that, let's say if you are standing today, we are in the month of May, the March is already over. So you are 2 months into forward EPS and 10 months into FY0 EPS. So you know that at least 10 months of the EPS number is frozen. It is not going to change. But next 2 months, and as you keep moving forward, this FY EPS will become from 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and so on and so forth. So because of the fixed anchor, there's the possibility of trailing EPS giving you error term is lower compared to the forward 12-month EPS, because it's an analyst expectation and the expectations can be prone to error. But the reason we had to do this is because of the 2020 bull run that we all saw. On trailing EPS number, market was clearly looking completely very expensive, and it was not making sense, and none of the stocks were coming under the value parameter. And there was a lot of talk going on that probably market is working on FY2 numbers. Now, if it's FY2 numbers, we are essentially talking about forward EPS then. So we had to do this analysis that what if we simply drop our trailing 12-month and completely move on to forward 12-month EPS numbers. But the problem with forward EPS numbers is, first, you will get enough analysts covering the stock in a large cap universe. But as you go down the cap segment, the number of the coverage starts deteriorating. Second is, as the number of analysts keeps coming down, the quality of forecast starts coming down. So to control for that, what we did is we started doing some sort of a data level optimization, that we started excluding analysts who have not updated their numbers more than, let's say, 120 days. or if the stock is not covered by at least 4 to 5 analysts to have a proper representation in the estimate numbers. Once we did that optimization, you will see how the numbers have improved. In the pre-optimization, the forward 12-month EPS over 3-month, 12-month was hovering around 4%. Post-optimization, it jumped almost to 10%. Right, and same thing we see jump in risk as well as return per unit of risk. And then we evaluated it for its statistical significance, and you will see that the statistical significance also improved from T-stat of 3 to T-stat of 5. Having said that, one important conclusion we came out with is that unlike in case of trailing, if you are using forward EPS, you cannot go look back window older than 4 or 5 months, because after that the curve is falling very steeply, which basically means that you have to keep updating your model at least within 3 to 4 months time, and which kind of makes sense because every 3 months the companies come out with new number and new information is there in the model. So that is how we did the earnings momentum analysis. Now, coming to the main part of it, which a lot of people wanted to see. Before I get into the defensive momentum performance and everything, I just wanted to touch upon the design element. And this is not specific to defensive momentum. This is across all the OpenQ portfolios or solutions that we come up with.
Right.
First is that the strategy, because it's an algo-driven process where no fund manager is looking at or tracking the company on a daily basis and so on, the process itself should have a self-corrective mechanism.
Okay.
Second is,
you don't know what are the holdings in your
no. So if you ask me what it is today, I wouldn't know, because
oh, is it okay? Great.
The process has been defined, the algo has been set up, and the through cloud computing, it gets generated automatically on a daily basis.
All right.
Second is the CAGR should be 20% plus over the cycle. For all the strategies that we come out with, this is the threshold. And why 20% is important? Because in case of passive strategies like Nifty 50, ETFs and Index Fund, the expectation is around 8, 10, 12% today in the long run. So if somebody is coming with to invest in you in a factor strategies, which is considered to be a little risky, and I will come on the risky part a bit more in the subsequent slides, your return should be at least much better than the market. So if market has 10%, we say, and we all know that Warren Buffett long-term compounding return is also around 20%. So
yeah,
kind of works. Third is implicit defense mechanism. And that is one of the reasons why we have built in risk parity on raw momentum. So considering raw momentum with low volatility, it tends to kind of nullify each other's extremes. Fourth is holding period. Why is holding period important? Now, when we invest in stock market, we are essentially taking money out from somewhere and putting it over here. So when you are taking it out from somewhere, there's an opportunity cost associated with the money. So if your holding period is high, is pretty big, then the opportunity cost is also very big, right? So which means your return should be that much more for you to tide over your opportunity cost. But if we can somehow control the holding period lower than the market average and still maintain a CAGR of 20, then I think it's a pretty sweet spot to be in, where your opportunity cost issue will be taken care of. Fourth is implicit profit booking. Now, and this is very closely tied to the weighing scheme that we use. So one of the way people allocate fund is that they allocate more to their winning stocks, which is essentially a market cap weighing. And there's nothing wrong. It's a perfectly okay strategy. The only problem is when that winning stock all of a sudden becomes a losing stock. So you are losing a big money on a very big allocation.
Right.
And you never in the process booked any profit as well. What risk parity essentially does is that if the stock, now risk is something that works on both ways. If the stock corrects very fast and if stock moves very fast.
Correct.
In both the cases, risk. And if your standard deviation increases, the allocation automatically comes down. And if the allocation comes down, you have to book profit in the next rebalancing. So it's as simple as that. And lastly is stop loss, and which is where the Wealth Desk team helps us, is that no matter how good a portfolio manager you are, how theoretically best portfolio you have built, nobody is above market, right? So when market is in a bad mood and he says, now you see what I do to your money, only thing you can do is stop loss, take your money and get out of the market.
Stop loss is the ultimate truth.
Stop loss is the mother of all defense.
Yes.
right? So these are the design elements around which we build most of our investment solutions. And okay, we'll just quickly touch upon whether those design elements have hold true over last 10 years or so. So because we are talking of defensive momentum here, so normally people talk about 1 year, 3 year, because we have been able to do 20 years of back test, and you want to return over the cycle. That, and over 20 years, you had IT bubble burst, you have GFC, you have 2020 pandemic. So over last 10 years, defensive momentum have given you 30%. Over last 5 years, it has given you 32%. Over last 3 years, it has given you 23%. And last 1 year, of course, thanks to the market, the beta was a very important component. So we made 84%.
Sujit, any idea as to how this compares to the benchmark? And I think defensive momentum would have what, top 500, right?
Yes.
Stocks from top 500. So any
Correct.
idea? So I remember that this has outperformed the benchmark on all the.
We can actually quickly look at it on our website. Let me just quickly launch our website and see. Can you see the website?
I can only see the presentation, which is
Okay,
being minimized. Yeah.
Now?
Yes.
So
guys, we'll take all the questions. I know there are a lot of questions on this. We'll take all the questions quickly once Sujit covers these couple of more slides. Yeah.
So here you go. So since inception over 20 years, so these are the differences where the alpha is. So
okay.
Is 11%. In last 1 month, we didn't do well because we are heavily weighted on cyclicals, whereas last 1 month, because of the COVID issue, pharma have done a little better.
All right.
So year to date, 11, 3 months, 9%, 1 year, 17%, and so on.
So great alpha. I mean, consistently it has been over 10%, almost like beyond 1 year.
Right. And this is about.
Okay, so today 63.61% is basic materials in the as the sector, right?
Correct. Yes. So that's the sector allocation.
And we only have 4 sectors exposure as of now.
It's a 10 stock portfolio, so it's a concentrated portfolio.
Right. Of course, 10 stocks. Yeah.
Right. And since you spoke about sector thing, let me just quickly show you the historical sector allocation as well. So interestingly, if you see, when we entered in the March crash, we were pretty much well balanced across different sectors, right?
Okay.
As we moved forward by July, we were 51% in healthcare. And by September, we were almost 75% in healthcare, right?
Nice. Okay.
We all know that how healthcare played out last year.
And you did not have any role into picking a sector, right? It's only momentum.
It's only process. I can't take credit. That is what market does. You should let market to be your fund manager rather than relying on anyone else individuals.
On Sujit, yeah.
And then from September onwards, we started deallocating our exposure. So you'll see from 75%, we came down to 40%, and the exposure of technology started increasing.
Of course, yeah.
And by November, you'll see healthcare is only 28%, technology, only 2 sectors. Right.
And this is where all the mid-cap technology stocks, Persistence, Tata Elxsi, and everything just ran up.
They ran up, right. Right. And then you'll see that in December, again, we are now well balanced, where cyclical stocks like financials and real estate have started coming in.
Right.
And January, cyclicals were almost 20% and basic materials 50%. Now, you know that before budget, we went through a minor correction. And then post-budget, we rallied pretty much. So
from 1st Feb, yes.
From 1st Feb. And our cyclical over tilt helped us pretty much over there. And we did really well, almost 15% in 1 month post-budget. And
I just saw cyclicals becoming 75% in somewhere, I think, end of Feb or March. Oh, sorry, 7.65. Okay, sorry.
7. So that is what the
Algo does for you.
Does. So I'll go back to my.
Brilliant. So of course you run multiple portfolios, but today the session is all about defensive momentum, which is actually one of my favorites as well in the entire thing. But we can see that most of, so Digital India, of course, because the way it has been running for the past 3 years.
Right.
In fact, Digital India has been one of the outperformers across the time horizon, and Make in India as well.
Right. And Make in India is where we have the value factor. So,
okay.
And we have not used either price to book or price to equity to define our value.
Right. Great. I think we can move forward.
Now, this is a very important slide. So when I said we are only 10 stock portfolio, now somebody might ask that, यार आप एक तो momentum कर रहे हो, which is high beta factor, उसके ऊपर खाली 10 stock ले रहे हो, which is very common portfolio. मतलब risk का क्या होगा? Now, this is a study which has not been done by OpenQ and is not new. It's as old as 1977. At the same time when CAPE model and the high beta investing was pretty much prevalent. It says that your risk starts, maximum reduction in risk happens when you move your equity, number of stocks from 1 stock to 6, 7, 8 stocks max, 10 stocks. After that, the reduction in risk is very minuscule. Only thing it results into is dilution of returns. Okay. And that's why you'll see that a lot of PMS houses who run a 30 stock portfolio, mutual funds who run a 35, 40 stock portfolio,
50, 60 stocks portfolio,
60 stock portfolio. So the expectation is again 10, 12%. But what happens to the risk? Let's see. This is defensive momentum Nifty 500. Look at the total risk, 23, 22, very similar risk profile. Right. Look at the drawdown. Global financial crisis, 2008, Nifty 500 fell by 64%, we fell less. 2020 pandemic, Nifty fell by 38%, we fell less. And the return is double that of Nifty 50. Right? So that is what the research says, that so long you are running a concentrated portfolio, but while designing the portfolio itself, the design elements, if you have built in the defense mechanism and everything that I spoke about, there's no reason why you cannot beat market with a concentrated portfolio and have a very passive way of wealth creation in the long.
What is tracking error? Can you quickly define? I mean, I can, but if someone is asking, let's quickly.
Yeah, the tracking error is basically the standard deviation of excess return between OpenQ defensive momentum and Nifty 500. Right. So basically, it tells you that how much can your return deviate from Nifty 500 given a certain statistical probability. Right.
Yeah, sure.
So now this is the annual returns of defensive momentum over last 20 years. And you can see that over last 20 years, it has given only negative return only twice, whereas benchmark has given negative return 4 times.
Yep.
Right. And this is where the monthly return, I was talking about September 20, when we were 75% allocated to pharma. Our returns was almost 12%, very similar to pharma. Our pharma strategy gave around 13% in September at that time. And in February, when the market rallied and we were over tilted on cyclicals, we made 16% in 1 month. And the numbers speak for themselves. This is the last slide I would want to end my presentation. I am sorry, Vaibhav, I think I overshoot my time limit, but I'll quickly wind this up. This is a rolling return chart. So what we saw earlier was the returns over different time frames, that 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and so on. But rolling return is basically, as you would know, that on average, on a daily basis, how much return has the strategy made. Okay. And this chart relate with our holding period. So you can see that on a 1 year basis, rolling basis, the strategy has still given you some negative return. Majority of that is in 2008, 9, and on a 3 year basis, it has never given you negative return. Now,
I think this is for 6 or 7 years for mutual funds, right?
Yeah. So typically, and that is what I said, that you can run a very concentrated strategy with an alpha generation and still reduce your holding period, which was one of our design elements, which I mentioned. So now, why is this important? This is important because at which the rolling return of your strategy stops becoming negative, that should be the minimum holding period. A lot of time we hear people say that, if you want to invest in equity, have a 5 year, 7 year horizon. That is okay, broadly from the macro point of view, but it should be very portfolio specific. So for our OpenQ defensive momentum, if you are able to hold for 3 years based on last 20 years data, we feel that you should at least have some positive return. How much, we don't know. But if you are able to hold it after that, we know that the negative period is over. And after that, the positive return, the compounding story will start working, and it will be a very powerful story.
Correct.
So that's the story about the holding period. Oh, sorry. One last slide remained is that momentum. A lot of time people say momentum is a bad word, right? We fundamental driven hona chahiye, अच्छी company honi chahiye. I mean, look at the factor exposure of the momentum strategy. High momentum, lowest on risk. So 5-star basically means it's lowest on risk. That is also in top 20% least volatile stocks, and 5-star on quality. So, and compare, how does it compare to Nifty 500 benchmark? Of course, momentum is high by design. Our risk is lower than Nifty 500, and our quality score is pretty much similar to Nifty 500. So why is momentum a bad score? It's a very powerful tool to have in your arsenal of wealth creation journey. With this, I think.
Thank you so much, Sujit. I'll just take a couple of questions. I mean, which is into my domain, let's say. Otherwise, I'll just push all the remaining questions to you guys. This is the basket which is available on wealthdesk.in. You can go to the website and you can log in from your broker account. We have integrated with Zerodha and Upstocks and a lot of other brokers. You can create, you can log into that, and minimum investment, as someone asked, was 10,000. It's 10,000, I think, Sujit, right?
Yeah,
you can start with a minimum of 10,000, and then you can do an SIP. And then what happens is that rebalancing happens every 1 month, which is an automated feature, which you will get a notification that, okay, if you have taken something on 22nd of May, the rebalance will come to you on 22nd of June. You have to press OK. The good thing is, unlike a mutual fund, all the stocks immediately get into your Demat account. The visibility is there. You just need to pay the subscription fee, which I'm not sure what Sujit has kept. You can go to the website and see. It is very, very minimal, much lesser than what mutual funds actually charge. And
it's a 50 basis point every 6 months. So
50 basis points on every 6 months. So that you need to pay as a subscription fee, and then the remaining charges are your brokerage charges. If you have an account with a discount broker, then that also reduces a lot. So I would suggest do an SIP over there. I always suggest do an SIP in equity investment, never do lump sum. So probably you can Sujit, you can select an SIP interval, or is it 1 month currently for across?
So you can select the SIP interval, but the rebalancing of the SIPs will happen 1 month only. So, but then it becomes a little complicated even for the end user to manage it. So I think if you just keep your SIP monthly, it becomes very simple for the end user.
Great. And guys, yes, there are plans to integrate with all the brokers in India. Right now, we are almost with around 70 to 80% of them, but integration with other brokers are also in the pipeline. You can go to the website and see which all brokers we have integrated with. Just a second. So Abhishek has shared some links on the chat. You can go to them and can look at it. So just a second. Abhishek is from the Wealth Desk team. So Abhishek, I have just given you the access to unmute yourself, and if you can just speak, and that if you can hear me, if you want to explain in 1 or 2 words that how do retailers subscribe, then probably after that we can take the questions which are related to the technical stuff.
Hey, hi Vaibhav. Hi Sujit. Yeah, so subscribing to the Well Basket, very like 5-step process. You just log in. You can just visit openq.welldesk.in, and from there you can select to discover various Well Baskets available there, which are created by OpenQ. And from there, you can log in using your broker credentials. So we have partnered with various brokers across the country. So we have ICICI Direct, we have Prabhudas Lilladher, we have discount brokers like Zerodha, Upstock. So you can just log in using your credentials, and once you complete your risk profiling, which is mandatory. So you have to complete your risk profiling, submit your KYC, and then you have to pay the advisory fee, which is calculated based on your investment amount. Say if you're trying to invest 10,000 rupees, you have to pay 0.5% every 6 months. So you can pay the advisory fee, and then that's it. You can just continue with the order execution. So it's a 4-step process.
Guys, it's a seamless execution. It's very easy. I think the team has worked incredibly well to make it very, very convenient for the retail investors to actually go and do easy transactions. I myself, since the time I have first spoken with Sujit after joining WealthDesk, I've become a big fan of at least the defensive momentum strategy. I'm yet to look at the other strategies, but defensive momentum, I'm all in. So just go out and try it out a bit. So with that, I think, Sujit, I'll just quickly take some questions. We are already at 5:25. I'll take first the questions which have been asked on Q&A side. Chats are a little, juggled up. So someone is asking, how does harmonic patterns also applied in quant-based models? I don't think so. But over to you.
So one is, you see, quant is a process. You can apply that to anything. As I mentioned at the start, if you have a data, if there's a pattern and that pattern is recurring over a long period of time and it can be evaluated mathematically, of course, you can apply a quant process to that, whether it's a harmonic pattern or whether there's any other pattern. You should know how to use it.
Right. When do you think quant trading will boom in India? So we know few of the mutual funds have also come up with the quant funds, but the AUM is not getting into it because the mentality of people is still not quant related, which we are actually trying to break. What is your thought process? I mean, how much time it should take?
I think we are just right there. We are at the cusp and it's going to explode in a very big way in coming years. And the reason why I say this is that there are a lot of brokerage houses, PMS houses who have applied for mutual fund license. The wealth distributors, NJ Invest has recently gotten a mutual fund license. And they all are looking to launch a passive process-based portfolio, smart beta-based portfolios and all.
Right.
If you read news items in public domain, and recently SEBI also relaxed the norm that, I think 5 years of continuous profitability criteria has been done away with. So I think the way the equity investment journey people have had so far in India, whatever little equity culture we have in India, mutual funds have no doubt played a very important role. But I think it's time that alternative investment solutions are going to hit Indian markets very soon through the advisory route like us, or through the new age mutual funds who have applied for the license are getting licensed. So it's a matter of time that you will see the India will go to the same quant journey what we see in US today.
Okay. Someone has asked the question for me, where can we see all the videos? Where is it uploaded? Guys, I will share the YouTube link on LinkedIn and probably you will get an email which you had actually logged in from. You'll get the, Sujit, is it possible to share the PPT? Otherwise, obviously the video is being recorded. The PPT can be seen throughout the video. Otherwise, it's your call. I mean, it's your PPT.
PPT actually has a lot of our proprietary research information.
Sure. No problem. Does Quantech provide paid calls for clients based on quant investing? So no. This is we only have the basket, right? I mean, you subscribe to the basket and we are done. Right. And guys, it's so easy. It's a very cheaper alternative. You can easily buy the basket.
If somebody wants to have a conversation in terms of have an alternative view or something, or on we can definitely engage but there's no commercial angle to it. It's more like
education.
Education kind of.
Yeah. Have we reached a time where quant models are developed based on modern AI/ML methods, specifically deep learning like RNN, LSTM, GRU? I don't know about all these things.
So that's a good question. So when we were in MSCI, we were trying to do a lot of AI/ML stuff. So we did some gradient boosting, some NLP methods, some LSTM method, and so on. But my personal understanding is that you can use AI/ML based portfolios and I know few trading houses that do that from the trading perspective. In the investment world, AI/ML driven portfolio I'm yet to see from the long-term investing perspective. But this data science driven or model driven things are very good in application when it comes to risk attribution or analytics. And in OpenCube, we are actually working on something interesting from the attribution perspective using similar concepts. But in terms of investing, creating a portfolio and making an alpha consistently out of the market using some AI/ML and regime modeling, I'm yet to see that happening on a consistent basis.
Great. How can one learn about the quant-based strategies, say online courses, books you would recommend to build up knowledge? Anything you would want to share you have top of your mind?
So I'll tell you, I've already shared in my investment journey, right? First is the very basic thing of being a quant guy is that your logic process should be very clear. Your logic thought process should be there. Now, start with what you know. So if you go to any courses or books, they will only end up giving you a lot of jargons. I can recommend you 3-4 books if you're really interested. Look at Active Portfolio Management by Greenwald and Kahn. There is The Quants by Scott Peterson, Quantitative Equity Portfolio Management by Cincinnati, if I'm pronouncing his name, and Kim. So I've read all these books, but I read these books only after I spent good 4 or 5 years in the quant domain, not from the very start. So start with what you know. We all know how to invest in equity investing, but it's just that you need to distill your thought process, bring down, sort out the clutters, bring it down to very simple 2, 3, 4 step process, put that in Excel, and then just run with it. And once you do this on a regular basis, it's just a matter of time that you will move on to the next leg of coding and programming.
Got it. Thanks. So someone is asking, so basically Wealth Desk, and Abhishek, I would need you over here. So basically Wealth Desk is going to pick stocks based on my risk appetite and the amount I'm willing to invest in a case of SIP. And it will also execute trades on my behalf. Trade in the sense, the stocks in which it would invest on my behalf, or is it going to suggest the stocks to me with respect to risk and investment amount, and I will have to execute it? So I'll answer that. So basically, see, every end of the month, whenever the rebalancing is happening, the pop-up will come to you that, okay, these maybe out of these 10, 3 stocks have to be moved out and 3 more new stocks have to come up, or some same stocks weightage will be changed, and you have to press OK to it, and the entire thing gets gets realigned. Sell orders and buy orders get executed. If you so Abhishek, do they have a discretion on whether to accept one leg or 2 legs, or all the legs have to be accepted?
So currently the orders are to be executed in a basket manner. So they have to, approve this. Although it's a single click approval, they don't have a discretion to, edit the advice list or stocks which are suggested to them. They have to approve all of it. Yes.
Because guys, you are paying an advisory fee on the complete basket, right? If you have to partially take it, and then you will say, okay, I have not got the returns which actually were promised or something. So that defeats the purpose, right? In mutual funds, when you buy it, you have to actually keep buying the units. You don't have any kind of discretion. Here, you can have a discretion as to, but then why do you want to? I mean, if you're paying a fee, just adhere to the process, right? So that is what my suggestion would be. Nishant is asking, do we have this strategy in the form of a mutual fund? There are some restrictions on direct equity investment for people working in the financial industry. I don't know, Nishant. Right now, we do not have this in the form of a mutual fund. And anyways, mutual fund will never allow you 10 stocks only. So they have a, so that's the limitation. I do understand, because at Deutsche, I was also under the same fix, but I as of now, mutual fund route we are anyways not taking, because that's something.
But just to add, for if you are interested in momentum strategy in the mutual fund, I think UTI has recently launched an ETF on NSE Momentum Index. Okay. So you can take a look at that.
Great. CAGR inception in 10 plus years performance of defensive momentum strategy. Is it based on backtesting, or was it active more than 10 years? Backtesting,
no,
right?
Backtesting, yes.
Yeah. Sujit quit MSCI in 2015, guys. So
no, MSCI quit in 2018.
Okay.
DBI quit in 2015.
All right. Sorry. Okay. Could you please name brokerage houses deploying AI ML for trading the markets? Right now, a lot of them are coming up with tech-based thing, and gradually, I think everybody has to come up. Right now, whosoever is doing, I don't know. Sujit, do you have any answers?
I mean, I know one BP Wealth that we are integrating.
Right.
The BP Wealth guys does a lot of AI ML based trading, not investing.
Right. Any source through which we can access data for free? How is subscription fee charged in SIP case, Abhishek?
So currently they have to come to the platform and make the payment, but gradually we are coming up with ENAC facility. So once they create a mandate, the fee will be auto debited from their account.
Awesome. Awesome. Any timelines for it?
So we are expecting to go ahead and, you know, complete the ENAC process by end of the coming month.
Awesome. Great. What percentage of total orders on the exchange are driven by quants or automated systems? Interesting question. I do not have that number.
In India, I wouldn't know. But one thing I can tell you is that direct market access was started by SEBI only in 2008, which is essentially where you are granted co-location server and so on. People say colo and all. So some firms are doing, like I know Daulat Capital is one of them that used to do at some point. I think BP Wealth also does, if I'm not wrong. But I don't think in India the automated order has reached the stage that we see in US today. So and I think there might be some regulatory changes would be required for, because I know that a retail investor, even though a lot of us use Python and Zerodha API or Fire's API to set up your individual algo trading. But if I'm not wrong, the rules say that the individual cannot do end-to-end automation. At the end of the day, the individual still need to click its order on the exchange. If you want to do end-to-end automation, you need to fall under that direct market access offering that SEBI has.
Got it. So how do you optimize a large scale portfolio for transaction cost, market impact, and slippages? Is it more to do with multi-objective optimization or a normal convex optimization work?
Well, we are a 10 stock portfolio. We don't.
Yeah, I think that's what. I don't think so. We should be. Yeah. And I know the portfolio. I mean, most of them are into the mid cap space. I think it was what, large cap, 30-40% large cap, 60% mid cap. But it's
so
yeah.
Yeah, so it's again depends in which sector and which cap segment we are seeing the spread. So,
what's the typical churn of the portfolio?
So it's a price-driven portfolio, so the churn is high. It can on a monthly rebalancing, you can expect anywhere between 35 to 40% churn on every rebalancing. But we are actually working on a low churn portfolio where we use some sort of a clustering and stuff like that, where the results are very promising. So we will come out with a low churn momentum portfolio also.
How replicable are your models? How different are they from other quant models?
Well, as I said, quant is a process. So one thing I would like to mention about the model is that model is nothing but a set of rules, right? But you can define a rule in a closed system environment or in an open system environment. When you are defining it in a closed system environment, you need to divide the data between in-sample and out-sample. Now, on in-sample, you first train the model, parameterize it, and then is the parameterization and so on and so forth. And then you see whether it works on out-sample data or not. But based on my experience, what I've seen is that, and this is how typically the AI/ML models also work, where you first train the model based on in-sample data, and then you expect the model to work. But as we all know, that market doesn't work in a closed system environment. It's an open system environment, and a lot of time things keep coming out of syllabus, which, before 2008, the whole world used to work on a normal distribution where plus minus 3 standard deviation used to be the norm. Now, 2008 showed you that 15, 16, 20 standard deviation can also happen. And all the quant models went through for a toss. I know Goldman, I was in London at that time, and Goldman's strategy lost almost 20, 25% in one day. The day, I think, Lehman announced its bankruptcy and so on. So I'm not a very big fan of closed system model when it comes to investment solutions. But as I said, it works very well if you want to design an analytical solution around attributions or Brinson attribution like allocation, stock selection, and so on. But I personally don't do portfolio building using closed system models.
Okay, how would the stop loss work for large position size if I have high AUM? Is there any algo order execution or entire position is liquidated with the market order?
Right. So there are two levels of stop loss we have in place. One is a stock level and one is the portfolio level, and both have a different logic. So if there is an event in the market and if the stock moves intraday beyond a certain threshold, then only that particular stock is liquidated and you are moved to cash. But if there is a market-wide event that has happened as something like 2020 and the whole market is falling in almost like a bottomless pit, then your whole portfolio will be liquidated and moved to cash. And we will wait in the next rebalancing to take a position further.
Are your models patented? Are they your IP? Yes, they are your IP, but are they patented?
Well, as I said, if you want to have a conversation, I'm more than happy. We all are students of the market, so I don't mind having an information exchange with one another.
Right. I'll take the last question. The returns are excellent. Do you have an estimate of the returns post tax and brokerage and depository charges? Example on Zerodha, what will be the 30% CAGR look like after all the charges? Guys, see, it's a short-term call, so you'll have to incur a 15% STCG tax, I'm sure. And given it's Zerodha, so delivery charges are 0, but then you have to incur the STT, stamp duty, and everything. Plus, you can say 1%, 0.5% semi-annually goes to 1% annual fee for the advisory, for the subscription charges. So you can do the calculations, guys. I mean, still it would be much higher than the post-tax returns probably you would get on a small cap or a mid cap mutual fund on a 3-year basis. So that would be my answer for that would be yes. I'll skip the questions now, guys. We are at 5:40. Almost 50% people have already left. This recording will be available on YouTube, so you can listen to all the questions again, answers, whatever. There have been a lot of questions on the chat boxes, but I do not think so I'll be able to cover that because it will take another half an hour for me. I'll just quickly look at one or two questions so that at least on the YouTube it is available. How does the exit process work? For example, if I invest 1 lakh, can I exit after 1 lakh along with the returns that are generated? Sumit, yes, you can exit even the next day if the T+2, I think, right? So exit is as simple as that. Correct, Sujit?
Yeah, that's right.
But then you have paid the fee, right? So stick around, right? But yeah, if you have made a great returns in just 1 month, you've made 30% returns in 1 month, it's your call. If it is auto adjusted, how is the broker POA managed? Because that is not allowed by default. This is about buying and selling of stocks in the account. Abhishek, any idea?
Sure. So these are not auto adjusted. I mean, if I've understood the question correctly, the investor has to come to the platform and approve the stock list. So in case of rebalancing, an advice is issued by the advisor, but you have to come to the platform and approve it.
Correct. Sujit, from a 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, how risky do you think the portfolio is?
I showed the risk numbers. Our risk numbers are very similar to that of the market, that is Nifty 500. And our drawdown is lower than the Nifty 500. So you can do the conclusion yourself.
Is the cash component invested in liquid Bs?
Not really, because whatever cash is generated because of slippages, the amount is very small. On top of that, if we invest it in liquid Bs, we are talking of 3 to 4% per annum, and that too on a 1 month rebalancing. So the numbers will be very minuscule. It's not advisable to build a process out.
Okay, any recommendation on what percentage of our asset allocation can be towards these investment strategies? I'll take that question. Guys, see, now that depends upon your risk profile, your return objectives and all. If you are, let's say, 70% into equities, I would say at least think about at least allocating, start with at least 10% to 15% of your allocation towards quant-based strategies. And I am very sure that in the next 3 years, more and more you will be moving towards, kind of these kind of strategies once you start realizing the super returns, probably what you're getting. But for an experiment, because this is new for Indians, I would not say that go all in. So out of that 70%, 10% can be allocated. I have personally, I'll tell you my allocations. My allocation is 72% around in equities, which comprises of international equities as well. Out of that, around 10 to 12%, I will be probably by the end of 6 months, I will be investing through SIPs into the defensive momentum strategy. So that's but otherwise it is very subjective. I can't answer like just a one-liner question. I think with that, I'll have to stop, guys. I'm very sorry. It's almost 1 hour 45 minutes. I'll share the recording and the link, and an email will be followed up with all the details which we discussed today. Thank you so much, Sujit, for all the time. I've taken much time of yours. I hope you enjoyed this. And
thank you so much, Vaibhav. It's an amazing audience you have. And actually, I should apologize. I kind of overshot my time.
No, I think the topic was like that, that I also thought that more and more people can, kind of take it out from you, because these are being available on YouTube as well. So it's not like that people can watch it again and again, right? So having a piece of your mind, piece of your thought is going to be amazing for the record and for people listening afterwards as well. Thanks, Abhishek, for joining as well and answering the questions. Guys, next time we'll be with a new guest. I'll announce shortly what all new topics we are going to come up with. Stay tuned. See you next Saturday. Bye everybody.